Thank you guys again for coming for the second week. As you all know, it's still Black History Month. We're about halfway through now. Still got 2 weeks to go of lessons, but this week is Black culture and Black contribution. If you weren't here last week was just an introduction to Black history, general Black history that some of you may have already known, just to get everyone up to speed. And then this week is going to be Black contribution, just kind of seeing how Black people have, added to this world and things that may have been overlooked when we talk about stuff. So yeah, we can get started with that now. Once again, like I said last week, this is all very much like a springboard for you guys to go off and do some extra research if you'd like. So yeah, I highly recommend for you guys to do that, especially with the first topic that we're going to touch. Here's a quick overview. So we're going to start off with inventions by Black people. Then we'll go on to culture and fashion trends, then Black British contributions specifically, and then popular culture. Okay, so firstly, inventions by Black people. Like I said, very base level. So there is actually a very long list of everyday things that people use that were made by Black people, but people don't know, or were co-invented by Black people. But the first that we're going to talk about today is the sanitary pad. It wasn't actually the sanitary pad specifically that was made by a Black woman called Mary Kenner. It was the precursor to the sanitary pad, which was actually like a sanitary belt, which I'm sure you can imagine was literally a belt. And then, it did the same thing that a sanitary pad would do. So that's something that a lot of women use that I'm sure, we're very thankful for. Next up is the 3-signal traffic light, which was created by Garrett Morgan. So what basically happened was that he witnessed a collision. So I think there was only the 2-signal traffic light, so the stop and then the go, and then he created the 3-signal one so that vehicles and people can know when to yield to prevent accidents. Garrett Morgan also invented the gas mask as well, and I'm sure you can imagine how useful that was, and it saved a lot of people's lives. Next up, one that I find very interesting is the home security system. So this was made by a woman called Mary Van Britten Brown. So Mary was actually a nurse and she lived in New York, and her husband would work nights, and her area had high crime rates. So she'd feel very uncomfortable staying at home alone. So what she did was basically
So this is a thing that we have is Black Month's history.
I was joking the door. It's like, so for me, I have to go. Yeah, the hook's missing there. I know
if somebody is not on mute. Could everyone just check that they're on mute?
So
okay, amazing, thank you. Okay, so Mary Van Britten Brown basically created this home security system because she was just afraid staying at home at night without her husband, and she lived in New York. There was high crime rates. So she created kind of a home security system for herself, which then was established to the more sophisticated one that we know today. Okay, so next up we have fashion trends. So firstly, we're going to start with headscarves. I'm sure you guys have seen many people wear headscarves. These aren't exclusively necessarily from Black culture, but these things are heavily, part of Black culture. And it tends to be influenced by various places, various cultures these days, but this is definitely something that's significant in Black culture. So headscarves, they can represent a lot of things like wealth, ethnicity, marital status, mourning. So the different way you tie the head wrap can signify different things. You can wear them to different occasions and you wear them in different ways, i.e. weddings or funerals and whatnot. So back in the day, slave owners actually required slave women to wear headscarves for practical purposes, but also just, to kind of take away their individuality as well. So what slave women did, they'd wrap them in different ways and wear different materials and kind of wear them, like make it their own, basically. And then over time, excuse me, Black women just continued wearing headscarves as an act of rebellion, making it their own and just kind of reclaiming it. Next is braids, generally used as a protective style nowadays because Black hair tends to break when manipulated too much. So braids is just something that keeps it intact and, keeps it protected over a period. But it's also used, like, especially specifically back in the day in Africa, in clans and in tribes to indicate like marital status, ranking, age, and which clan you belong to. And it will be very extravagant, big braiding styles and shapes. But also during slavery, they were used to depict like routes for escape and also to weave in non-perishable food to keep them going when escaping. And lastly, waist beads. So I actually used to wear waist beads myself when I was younger, but these are handmade for women by women, and it's kind of like a rite of passage thing. So over time, as a young girl would grow up, her mom or another woman in her family would get her these waist beads, and different colors symbolize different things. So they're very intentional, which is why people recommend for you not to just get waist beads from anyone, because, you need to know that they were made with the right intention. So they're worn every day to kind of like shape your body, but also indicate weight loss or weight gain. And these are like a symbol of femininity and fertility, sensuality. So they're usually worn underneath clothing because they're only really meant for like your lover to see. They're not something that should be, or culturally, they're not something that should be showing for everyone. Okay, next we're going to talk about Black British contribution. Firstly, we're going to talk about African soldiers and how over 500,000 African soldiers fought for Britain in World War II. So many of them were actually forced or hoaxed into fighting. And for many of them, Britain was actually colonizing their home country. So I'm sure you can imagine going to war is already a massive thing to get your head around, let alone fighting for a country who's colonizing your home country. And Britain actually paid their officers by their soldiers by ranking and their length of service. But regardless, African and Asian soldiers were paid the least. And many of them, the survivors, would often return to a life of poverty and were given little compensation. Next up, we have the Windrush generation. We actually spoke about this briefly last week, but for those of you who weren't there or need a reminder, so after World War II, again, Britain was basically in the process of rebuilding the country, and it invited and encouraged immigration from Commonwealth countries. So a lot of Caribbean people came over, promised prosperity and employment. But obviously recently, in the past few years, there was the Windrush scandal where many were being deported because they weren't given citizenship or the British passport. So they had to leave the life that they had set up here in helping rebuild the country and then go back to their home country after so many years. Okay, lastly, for Black British contribution, Notting Hill Carnival. I'm sure you've all heard of Notting Hill Carnival. It's one of the best carnivals. It's been described to be one of the top 5 carnivals of the world, which is huge. That's in London. It was London's very first Caribbean carnival, and it actually began in like a hall, like a town hall kind of thing. So it wasn't nearly as big as it is now. But it was organized by a woman called Claudia Jones, who was a Trinidadian social activist in Britain. And yeah, like I said, now it's just known to be one of the most popular carnivals around, which is obviously such a massive thing for Britain to be hosting that. And then lastly, I'm going to jump into popular culture. This is the last of today's lesson. So we've run through quite quickly actually, but we've got a few things that, like, first of all, we're going to talk about Betty Boop. Some of you may know the character Betty Boop. It's like animation character. She was actually inspired by jazz singer, African-American jazz singer, Esther Jones, who's this woman on the right there. So she was initially like a Black cartoon. And then as the animation became more of a like sex symbol, she became whitewashed and became a white woman. Next, we've got the Playboy bunny costume, the very iconic costume. This was actually designed by a Black woman called Zelda Wynn Valdez. So she was like a body inclusive designer to the stars, which was massive at the time because it was like the Jim Crow era, like right after slavery. So it was very big that she was, you know, doing so well as a designer, and Hugh Hefner basically approached her and asked her to make the iconic Playboy bunny costume. But of course, not many people know this. And it's very rare that we even saw Playboy feature a Black woman at all. Then lastly, I'm sure many of you have heard about Uncle Ben's branding. So basically, two Black men kind of contributed to the Uncle Ben's brand. So the first one was the Black man that you'd see on the side of the packet, who actually was a random guy who was approached in a restaurant, and he was like the host of the restaurant, and he was asked for his photo to be used because he had like a warm and friendly and reliable face, and he was paid $50 to be used all across Uncle Ben's branding. But as you can see, they've removed this now. They've removed the uncle and the image of the Black man. It was specifically called Uncle Ben's because Black people didn't tend to be called Sir or Mr. because it was kind of too much respect. But this man happened to be an elderly man as well. So Uncle was kind of like, you know, enough respect for an elderly man who also was Black. And the name Ben also came from a Texan rice farmer who won loads of awards for his rice. He was well known in his area. He actually had died a few years prior. So they used the name Ben because they obviously thought people would associate it with the Ben who, you know, was a rice farmer and had loads of awards. So yeah, that's just a way that Black people have contributed in branding. But like I said, that branding has changed now. And that is all for today. Thank you again for coming. Next week is going to be the Black experience, a sociological analysis. So we're going to be talking about education, mental health, employment, all of that stuff. So that's going to be more applicable to kind of today, understanding race today. And then that was supposed to be on the 20th, but we have a trifle, I believe. So there will be an email going out with a new date. So please just wait for that. And then week 4, that will be Black culture and marketing. So that will be, you know, something more practical that we can use at Earnest day to day, which should be good as well. Yeah, that's me for today. Thank you so much for coming, guys. I hope you enjoyed.